This is Robin with Great Mystery, and it's my pleasure to be welcoming you to Dr. EBEN Alexander. He is a neurosurgeon and author of the book Proof of Heaven, who had a near-death experience when he was in a coma for a week due to a brain infection, and talks about his amazing experience in his book and is here to share it with us today. So thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me, Robin.
If you could tell us a little bit about your experience.
Okay, I think it's important to point out I have worked as a neurosurgeon in teaching hospitals, had trained at Duke, and then was on faculty at Harvard Medical School for 15 years. And then in November 2008, I was driven into coma. Kind of came up out of the blue, out of nowhere. Within 3.5 hours, I was deep in coma, spent 7 days on a ventilator. Started out in the emergency room with a 10% chance of survival. By the end of that week, was down to 2% chance of survival, so my doctors were recommending just stopping the antibiotics. It was soon thereafter that I came back to the world. When I did come back, my brain really was wrecked, as they had predicted. Words, language, all my memories of EBEN Alexander's life before coma, religious concepts, more than 20 years spent in neurosurgery. Every bit of that was completely gone deep in my coma journey. And it was gone when I came back to this world. Things like words and language came back over hours and a day or two. Childhood memories came back over a few weeks. All my knowledge of brain, mind, consciousness, 2 decades of experience in neurosurgery and all science came back over about 8 weeks. A full recovery that really has no medical explanation. To this day, my doctors have no explanation for, one thing, how I developed such a rare disease. I had E. coli bacterial meningitis, which is almost always in newborns, extremely rare in adults. And then how in the world did I recover? That part has haunted me for years after my return and trying to come to a deeper understanding of healing and what, of course, in near-death experiences, you can find what we consider miraculous healing with no medical explanation. But I think that's part of the lessons that they bring to us. It can be of great value to all of us because this is all about healing. Now, it turns out that deep in my coma, I had a lot of experience. And if you had asked me before, as one of those neuroscientists who fully bought into the brain creates consciousness model before my coma, I would have told you that somebody that sick with their whole neocortex, which is the human part of the brain, being dissolved by this very aggressive infection, I should have had no experience at all. It turns out that deep in the middle of coma, it all started with what I describe as the earthworm's eye view, a very primitive, poor, subterranean, unresponsive kind of existence that seemed to go forever, although it didn't. I was rescued from that by a slowly spinning pure white light associated with a perfect musical melody. And that is what opened up like a rip in the fabric of that ugly realm up into a beautiful, idyllic, ultra-real gateway valley that I describe in detail in the book Proof of Heaven. Now, the interesting thing is none of that would have been possible by everything that I knew about brain, mind, consciousness, neocortex. Everything neuroscience tells us would be wrong, and I should not have had any rich experience. I think the earthworm eye view was the best consciousness my physical brain could muster soaking in pus. And that's why it was so surprising that the next step in the journey with that spinning white light and musical melody was opening up into a richness, a valley of ultra-real, as I described in Proof of Heaven, lots of Earth-like features. I was on a butterfly wing with millions of other butterflies, beautiful flowers, waterfalls and sparkling pools, a real paradise with lots of souls dancing, and I wrote all that up later, and they were souls between lives. Above us, some non-earthly features in the form of swooping orbs of golden light leaving sparkling trails and emitting these incredible, overwhelming, awe-inspiring anthems, chants, hymns. And of course, I said that those swooping orbs were angelic choirs when I wrote it all up later. And then that music of those choirs provided yet another portal in the higher and higher levels. I saw that time itself collapsed down so that time in our four-dimensional space-time is a complete illusion. And I saw how it collapsed down into a loop of point. There was a deep time in that spiritual realm, that gateway realm, that I would say is often where souls go through life reviews. That's where our souls go between lives, re-encounter our higher soul, get together with soulmates, plan the next incarnation, things like that. But even that deep time in causality collapsed down into higher and higher realms until I got to what I call the core, which is as far as I went. The core, infinite inky blackness filled to overflowing with abundant love of that creative source, of that being far beyond any possible words of description. That deity that when I first came back, to me the word, and I was trying to write all this up, the word God was a puny little human word that had too much baggage, and it didn't remotely do justice to the power and awe of that deity in that core realm. Also in that core realm, a brilliant orb of light, brighter than millions of stars, and there was the entire multiverse shrunken down to this very complex oversphere as part of essence in that core realm. And I would emphasize the core realm was beyond anything we would call time or space or form. And in that realm, told that I would be going back, that they would teach me many things, but that I wasn't there to stay. And then there were many lessons, which we can get into shortly, but all about time, space, how all of this works, the eternity of soul, the kind of illusory nature of boundaries of self, and how soul groups evolve through multiple incarnations in ascendance towards that oneness with the divine. A tremendous number of things that, again, we can touch on during discussion. But then I would tumble back down from that sanctum sanctorum of the divine back into that primitive earthworm eye view. And that was a big mystery to me. Why this tumble back? The good news is I very quickly recalled the notes of the melody, the musical melody that had been that original spinning like light. And by remembering the musical notes, going through those notes, in my mind, that would bring spinning white light to me in that that earthworm eye view realm, that primitive, subterranean, unresponsive realm. And the white light would come and open up again like a portal into that gateway realm, where I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing. Many times I passed through there. The best thing about that realm is there was a companion on the butterfly wing, a beautiful girl. I'll never forget how she looked, how she was dressed. She never said a word to me, but she gave me some of the most profound messages, which of course I think are messages for all of us that I bring back in the book Proof of Heaven, that you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You will be taken care of. And of course the one that I wish I had embellished on a little more when I wrote the book, you can do no wrong. In essence, that's right, you can do no wrong as long as we realize that the essence of our souls in that higher realm is all around unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance. And if we choose a pathway of love, that's our most direct route of ascendance. If we choose other pathways that involve handing out pain or suffering to others or showing greed or selfishness, those are a more arduous trek, and they may result, if we don't make amends in this life, with needing to go through full-blown lessons in a life review where we learn the lessons that we were meant to learn about that love, compassion, and forgiveness. That's really the point of that realm. And that's what if we want to take the most direct route through these reincarnation pathway towards oneness with the divine, it has to do with always manifesting as best as we can the infinite healing power of that unconditional love of the Creator, and serving as a conduit for that and passing it out to our fellow beings. And that's what allows the most direct ascent. But God loves us so much as to give us the gift of free will, in spite of the fact that that brings tremendous pain and suffering into this world of ours. But we have the choice to remember our divine connection to that God and to that infinite power, realize it has infinite power to heal, and that's what enables us to ascend through the multiple incarnations to that oneness. It turns out that I came back to this world at the end of this journey. Many times I would cycle up through these highest realms, tumble back down. And again, I think the lesson there was that the primitive earthworm eye view was the best consciousness my physical brain could muster. That's why the gifts of bacterial meningitis was such a beautiful gift. There's other diagnosis that could have put me in coma that would have enabled me as a neuroscientist, and all my scientific memories took up to 8 weeks to come back after my coma. And as they did, I was busy going through my medical records, talking with my doctors, my scans, neurologic exams, trying to understand how this happened in my brain. It seemed way too real to be real. I had never read the near-death experience literature before. I didn't realize that more than half of those accounts mention that ultra-reality. It's a very hard thing to put into words, but I came to realize after I did start doing all that reading, many weeks after I'd written down my original story of 20,000 words, I came to realize the similarity of all of these journeys. In fact, then got into the afterlife literature, writing to religious mystics and prophets going back thousands of years, realized they're all talking about the same thing. And it's the same realm. And it's when we get caught up in the little petty details and differences, some of which can be overlay, say, from our personal memories and from our cultural bias. But in my case, that's again why severe bacterial meningitis that had wiped out my entire neocortex, the human part of the brain, was such a gift. It had deleted all of that, which gave me this amnesia for my life. I knew nothing of EBEN Alexander's life. I had no words, no language, none of the religious concepts, none of that went into the coma with me. And that allowed for a very free and far-roaming journey, one that was totally without fear because I had no attachments, no responsibilities to other souls. And that allowed me to go very far and deep indeed to learn the lessons of that journey. So I think in a nutshell, that kind of gives you a thumbnail sketch of my coma odyssey. And I can tell you as I came back, the tremendous part of this was, even though my life was changed, and it's the kind of thing that is so hard to put into words for people to have that experience, the real shocker came a few months later as I glimpsed the clues, which I report in the book Proof of Heaven, that showed me the reality of the journey. And in fact, in going over it all with colleagues and others interested in consciousness, finally concluding that this did not happen in my brain or in the physical universe, although it was an absolutely real event that tells us a lot more about who we truly are. And the scientific side of my discussion then goes deeply into what's called the hard problem of consciousness and how no neuroscientist on earth can give you the first sentence to explain how consciousness might emerge from the physical brain. There's nothing to help materialist science along that pathway. And the hard problem of consciousness is a very deep conundrum indeed. The other thing is the enigma of quantum mechanics, because in fact that's been trying to tell us for more than 100 years that consciousness, soul, spirit is absolutely real at the core of all of existence. So I think with that kind of preamble, I would like to open it up for any questions.
That must have been quite something for you to reconcile when you came back.
I'm still in the process.
You know, and I'm wondering if in any of your research since this experience, if it might be more part of some ancient cultures is more normal than, let's say, our culture.
I would say there's been a tremendous knowing of all this in many cultures, going back thousands of years. So a lot of what I point out is the problem of this scientific materialism, reductive materialism, that is so empty. You know, that science that says it's close to a theory of everything, which can't tell you the first thing about the only thing any one of us truly knows exists, which is our own consciousness. That materialist science fails miserably at trying to explain this and trying to answer the whole mind-body debate, as it were, that's been going on for more than 2,600 years. I would say that a lot of this is a return of our secular Western culture to a much richer knowing. A lot of that knowing is kind of native to some of those indigenous cultures, and I would say it was part of our culture for a long time. But in the last 400 years, that natural science, scientific materialism has been growing in its knowing, and there are great gifts that science brings to us. But on the other hand, it doesn't offer the first thing about consciousness. So to pretend it has a theory of everything is ludicrous. And that's where I think a lot of this needs to go. It's a reawakening of our culture to some of this ancient wisdom, but I think with the gift of our modern scientific understanding, it becomes far greater. So what I propose in Proof of Heaven and in many of my talks is this is very much about a coming together of science and spirituality. And by that I mean that it's science fully acknowledging that soul, spirit, consciousness is absolutely real. In fact, it's the foundation of all of emerging reality in the physical universe. And the science that admits that, knows that, and then develops and grows based on that knowing will be far grander than the kind of kindergarten level productive materialist science that I believed was, ruled the day for 50 years of my life.
Right. Wow. We have some questions. One is from Carol, and she would like to know if you had an MRI or PET scanner, if there was something to indicate that your neocortex was completely shut down.
I think the best evidence, I did have CT and MRI scans. The best evidence is really found in the neurological exams. The last evidence of any quasi-normal function of my neocortex was within an hour or two of getting to the emergency room on that first Monday morning. And after that, very quickly, my exams deteriorated to decorticate and decerebrate posturing. I had brainstem damage showing up on that first day, too, with extraocular movement problems and my pupillary responses, things like that were really wrecked. Now, they did do CT and MRI scans, and basically what those show is that this affected all 8 lobes of my brain. There was really no part of my neocortex that was spared, and it was a full thickness destruction because you can see that what's called a gray-white junction at the very lowest level of the neocortex, of the gray matter. That whole juncture was no longer visible as a distinct boundary. It was being destroyed. So that was full thickness neocortical disruption, all 6 layers of the neocortex through all 8 lobes of my brain. But of course, MR and CT scans are not the best way to document what's going on. The neurologic exams are by far the best. And as I said, they showed that my neocortex was wrecked really to almost brain death criteria levels from day one. My doctors, as I said, to this day have no clue how I had any kind of experience at all, how I remembered any experience, and how I ever recovered. I can tell you by 8 weeks after my coma, all of my memories are back, even more than what I'd had before the coma. And that's a hard part to explain, but it became clear to me over the years since then in discussions with other people and revisiting kind of family memories and other things, that in fact my memory was restored to a more pristine level after recovery from the coma. That gives you a big idea of what's going on here. It has a lot to do with how experience and memory have tremendous components that are not based in the brain at all. And that's part of the deeper lesson of all of this.
Wow. What a gift.
It is quite a gift.
Do you think that so many, because of the advances in medical technology, that so many people are surviving what would have been where they would have otherwise died and are having these near-death experiences, that in a way that this is helping shift the consciousness in our culture?
That's very much the case. It turns out you can find near-death experiences all the way back to the time of the ancient Greeks. I mean, Plato reports the beautiful case of the soldier, who was put on a funeral pyre and then had these amazing memories that were identical to what you run into in modern near-death experiences. But as you point out, the real lion's share of these experiences have really come in about the last 50 years. In the late 60s, early 70s, doctors around the world developing techniques of cardiac resuscitation that basically has populated our world with millions of souls who have been to the other side and then come back. So we have a tremendous number of near-death experiences now to draw on. The similarities between them are striking. I think for the skeptic, like I was before my coma, and I didn't pay attention to the NDE literature back then, but if I had, I probably would have been pointing out little petty differences between them. Like, if a Christian sees Christ with this beautiful, loving light body, and then a Muslim sees Muhammad when they see the same perfect, loving light body, and an atheist sees something they don't know how to define when they see this perfect, all-loving light body. The key is they're seeing the same kind of thing. If you remember that our words, our language is very limiting. It's earth-derived, and also, if people have a near-death experience, often they describe the experience based on kind of their personal and their cultural bias. Again, that was a gift of my severe neocortical disruption, as I pretty much had everything wiped out to allow me to go on this journey. Now, as I said, my explanation for that for the months after my coma was, well, of course, I had severe destruction of my neocortex, so it makes sense that all my earthly memories were deleted. Of course, I came to realize that there were far deeper and more powerful reasons for why that amnesia occurred, mainly that I could not have gotten some of the deepest lessons of this journey if I'd had all those earthly memories. I really had to go, of EBEN Alexander's life, I had to go through that whole process of discovery to fully get the power and the reality of the journey.
Carol asked if you feel that our conscious or subconscious, well, I guess you've just been talking about this, kind of creates our experience in the afterlife.
I would say that the important thing to realize is our consciousness is, or I should say consciousness, is what creates all of unfolding reality in all of this universe. Consciousness is a necessary ingredient. Now, our own particular consciousness, what I view is that when we're incarnate in these forms, we have a limited consciousness. As I often put it, the brain does not create consciousness. In fact, it's a reducing valve or filter. So we are conscious in spite of our brain. But as we can get through that veil, which we do with near-death experiences, and reunite and come to know more of our higher soul, as we do between lives, as we do in near-death experiences, and I believe that we can all do through meditation, through centering prayer. We can also get in touch. We can thin that veil and come to that much higher knowing as we come in touch with that more universal consciousness. But I would say that the entire experience, both in this realm and in the higher realms, is all evolving out of consciousness at higher levels. I would put out there that in addition, that consciousness is really one that we all share. So that as you get to higher and higher levels, we are all of one consciousness. And important to point out, this is not just about humans at all. Our little linguistic brain puts us up on this pedestal that we don't deserve at all. Animals can have extremely rich spiritual knowing. They can be very telepathic. In fact, it's the linguistic voice in our head that gets in the way of so much of this knowing. And about three and a half years ago, I began pretty much a daily practice of meditation. I try to meditate 2 or 3 hours a day. And one of the first things I do in those meditations, and a lot of this is work I do with sacred acoustics, so those who are interested, go to sacredacoustics.com to learn more. But the first thing I do in these sound-enhanced meditations is to let my little voice, the linguistic voice in my head, make a request, state an intention for that meditation, offer up some gratitude, because this is all about gratitude. But then that little voice goes into timeout. And it's because there is far grander wisdom lying deep inside consciousness. Basically, the whole kingdom is within all of us. But we need to make the effort to go in and get to know that consciousness on a far deeper level. And remember that a lot of it cannot be brought back to this dualistic realm. And so much of it, even though it can be comprehended and understood at some level on those deep journeys, it cannot necessarily be put into any kind of earthly language. That's why I work with Sacred Acoustics to help develop these tools for deep meditation, because I think that's a crucial step in waking this world up. We each if we are truly seekers and want to know more about all this, we have to not only read the books, go to the presentations, watch the DVDs, but we have to do the work ourselves and go into our own consciousness.
So when you were talking about that experience of hearing that, like, heavenly music or that beautiful music, again, it's kind of like, do you feel that as we can attune our frequencies, or that there's some, like, sound resonance with how we're vibrating? And
I would say that sound frequency vibration is absolutely essential in our spiritual journey. It provided the key to transcend across realm after realm after realm to higher and higher levels, and that is something that is absolutely crucial. I think, of course, that's an example of how, going back to ancient times, there's been tremendous wisdom about how sound can be used to enhance spiritual journeys, to release us from the illusion of the here and now in our material brain and in our mind dumbed down on this side of the veil. There are ways to transcend that veil, and a lot of it has to do with sound. Now, it turns out the work I do with sacred acoustics and the meditations, and one of the products that we put out there is an audiobook called Seeking Heaven, Sound Journeys into the Beyond, that Karen Newell, who is the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, and I did for Simon & Schuster. But that Seeking Heaven has 4 sound meditations on it. Important to point out, we're not trying to duplicate anything about the sounds I actually heard on the journey. For one thing, those that the music, say, of the melody that took me from the earth from my view up into the Gateway Valley, into that ultra-real idyllic valley, or the angelic choirs that provided the engine to transcend to higher and higher levels up to the core. For one thing, that music cannot be brought back in any but the meagerest pale reflection of what it truly is in those realms. There's no way with earthly physics to do the same kind of music, even though I've worked with people to bring that music back to this world. But my point is that the sounds that we use in sacred acoustics have a far more powerful basis to them. They're not supposed to be pretty music or nice guided, verbal imagery or nice natural sounds, although those things are used. But it's much more of something that I explain at the end of Proof of Heaven. Very briefly, go into using brainwave entrainment through differential frequencies. Slight differences in the frequencies presented to the 2 ears can perform some amazing tricks in terms of how it intersects in the brainstem and what that then does to allow consciousness to be set free. In fact, again, it brings back the deep mystery to me in my journey was how in the world did I go from earth on my view, the best consciousness my brain can muster, soaking in pus, up through that brilliant light spinning melody into an ultra-real, idyllic, heavenly realm that was crisp, sharp, and far more real than this world. In fact, such a incredible abundance of perfect, rich tapestry of existence that my brain, now perfectly healthy, couldn't begin to duplicate it. There's a big clue there about what is going on. And so what we're trying to do, the mystery there was as my neocortex, the human part of the brain, was being destroyed, that's what took the blinders off. That's what enabled this far richer consciousness. And so my thinking in terms of the work of sacred acoustics was that there would be ways to use these differential frequencies that intersected in the brainstem and did something very special to kind of synchronize the activity in the hemispheres and basically duplicate the destruction that was going on due to my meningitis. And doing that by basically synthesizing, homogenizing the electrical activity in the neocortex and taking it offline, essentially, taking that information processing that we think the neocortex normally does, but by setting that aside, allowing my conscious awareness to be far freer and grander, completely outside of the illusion of the here and now that we're usually stuck with in our existence in the earthly realm.
It's interesting that so many cultures have had different kinds of chants and things also for getting into accessing other realms.
Well, I think that's very true. And the chants, as we mentioned, for those who get Seeking Heaven, Sound Journeys in the Beyond, we'll find is that, for one thing, Om is a perfect example. That was the sound I heard in that core realm on my journey in the same form of the divine. Om was basically, I looked on it as the resonance that you can find in infinity and eternity from that infinitely loving, all-powerful being, that deity beyond all words. And that's why I used the word Om in describing that deity when I came back. Because to me, the word God was a puny little human word. It didn't really do justice to the majesty and awe of that undefinable being. But of course, that's what I came to realize is what many refer to as God, or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh. I don't care what the words are. The words get in the way because they imply that there is some difference. But that's why I think the mystical traditions of each of the great religious faiths, Kabbalism, Jewish mysticism, Christian mysticism, Sufism, Islam, and Buddhism, it really all converges to one much deeper truth about a loving, infinite power at the core of all consciousness, at the core of this universe, that is one. And that's a big point in Proof of Heaven, is that so much of the confusion in our modern culture has to do with the fact that we have these false boundaries that are put up there by our linguistic brain or by humans who are trying to control other humans, twisting and distorting the words of the prophets to set up religious dogma that really has moved away from the original teachings of the prophets. And my understanding of all that after coming back from my coma experience was that there was a tremendous kind of synthesis and kind of a beautiful kind of symmetry and collaboration of knowing and of truth at the deeper mystical traditions in all these faiths, and that in fact all of that blends in with modern science and spirituality to a much higher knowing of all of this. That some of this is wisdom that's been around for thousands of years, but I also believe that our modern physics and cosmology brings a tremendous amount to the mix. In fact, one of the interesting gifts that materialist science brings is they're on a headlong rush to show you there's no material to the material world. If you look at string theories, or if you look at quantum gravity and other attempts to bring quantum mechanics and relativity into the same kind of system, and to do that in some way that fully embraces the deep mystery and the primary role of consciousness, it's about something that completely ascends above and beyond these false limitations that our linguistic brain tells us exist in our modern world. And I think that's a big part of this, is realizing that that oneness is a much better way of coming to know every bit of this. And that's why the reductive materialist science that I had worshipped before my coma, and I don't use that term lightly, in fact, that materialist science that says there's no such thing as consciousness, soul, or spirit, is a faith-based religion that has very little to support it. That's why I think that pure scientific materialism is coming to an end. And that will be a great gift for all. But so much of this is really rising above these false boundaries of separation. They are what lead to so much confusion.
Yes. And it seems though that science, because we believe so strongly in it, and like you say, how it's becoming to be non-material, non-locality and all these things, but it's helping us accept it or somehow understand it, put it in another language.
Well, I think the science is very important, and people often ask me, well, what do your scientific colleagues make of your story? And I can tell you that a lot of them fully get it. I get invitations to speak at medical schools, nursing schools, surgical groups. Of course, I always say the nurses have gotten this forever. I can speak for myself that some of us doctors are a little slow on the uptake. And the reality, though, is that this is about a much more mature science. As I said, the science that I worship before, that simplistic reductive materialism that says brain creates consciousness, that it's birth to death and nothing more, that science doesn't even remotely have the first thing to offer up about the nature of consciousness and how it might be created by the brain. As I said earlier, I would say the reason is it doesn't, because the brain is more the reducing valve and filter. But a lot of scientists are getting to know this. And there's my favorite book from a scientific source that really covers that is that book, Irreducible Mind, Toward a Psychology for the 21st Century, from the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. Ed Kelly, Emily Williams Kelly, Bruce Grayson, and others. Irreducible Mind is a world-changing book. It's mainly for the scientists out there. It's 800 pages of dense data and analysis, but it's all about non-local consciousness. And it's all about the reality of things like telepathy, precognition, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, near-death experiences, after-death communications, past life memories in children, all this about the reincarnation literature, which I didn't even realize exists in a scientific fashion until after my coma. And then I came to realize that it's a very strong part of the evidence. Even Carl Sagan, the kind of arch skeptic scientist, realized that there was far too much evidence in past life memories in children to ignore. So he admitted in his book, The Demon Haunted World, that there's a lot more to this. And to even begin to think that brain creates consciousness fails. It has nothing to offer up about how those past life memories in children occur, how reincarnation is an established fact in that kind of scientific world. This is really about finally moving into the deep end of the pool. You know, we were playing around in the shallow end, that kindergarten level of reductive materialist science that fails so miserably. This is about science growing up, and it does that by admitting the deep mystery of consciousness, soul, spirit, and that's how we move to the next level.
Do you think some conditions such as Alzheimer's and autism, where it seems that a part of the brain isn't functioning properly, but it also seems that the people with these conditions, some of them are really like switched on in another way, or accessing something else?
That's a beautiful idea there. Yes, I would say that, in fact, I'm just finishing book 2, and we went into a bunch of kind of working and analysis of all that. But those, what are called acquired savant syndromes, some people have called idiot savant syndrome, in the setting of autism or brain damage from a head injury or stroke, often result in these incredibly powerful superhuman mental abilities, far beyond any explanation from that materialist science that says brain creates consciousness. You have people who can have perfect memory, say thumbing through a phone book, one page per second, and then they know every name and number that they've seen. I had one patient who was hit in the head with a baseball, and afterwards he came back and he'd had a great recovery, but he had this ability to look at a map for 2 or 3 seconds, and then he could draw the entire map in great detail. That was not something he could do in any form before his head injury. Afterwards, there it was. It was an unmasking of some superhuman mental capacity. These things happen all the time. There are millions of these examples of these acquired savant syndromes. And what they show us is our little primitive idea of brain creates consciousness fails miserably. There's something much deeper going on here. And what I would say is these are examples of how the veil that I think is largely based in the neocortex, that veiling function, when it gets damaged like that, that's what allows for these superhuman abilities to come into existence. And there's, along a similar line, there's a beautiful book by Elmer Green, who did a lot of biofeedback work going back to the 50s and 60s. Brilliant, brilliant man. I've met him before. Very, very impressed. He's still very brilliant, even in his 90s. He wrote a beautiful book called The Uzweki Book of the Dead, or Why Alzheimer's Isn't What You Think It Is. His wife had Alzheimer's, and what he came to realize, was a very brilliant observer, was that there were certain periods in the progression of her disease where she would have these episodes where she seemed to be a little brighter, a little more communicative, but maybe kind of uttering what initially appeared to be kind of nonsensical. And as he got into deeper dialogue with her, he found that actually she was providing an incredible window into that spiritual realm. And he explains it all in that book. I would highly recommend it to those who are interested. And of course, in a similar fashion, in Proof of Heaven, I mentioned the other thing, in addition to acquired savant syndromes, terminal lucidity. And that is a real mind blower that so many healthcare workers see all the time, as do other family members, of a demented elderly patient getting close to death. And as they do that, they have these oases of incredible clarity, memory, reflection on life, discussion, and often at times when they seem to be in the presence of souls who have passed over, who are there to help escort them to the other side. And those episodes of terminal lucidity are very striking when you see them. And they clearly show us a much deeper reality about the nature of consciousness, experience, soul, and the fact that our souls do not end at the time of the death of the brain and body, but in fact are liberated to a far grander scale of awareness.
Can you share with us a little bit of, what some of the insights were that you got on the other side? Some things that you maybe were told or shown?
Right. I think the most important thing is that realm, the coin of that realm is love, pure, unconditional love of infinite, indescribable power. And of course, you often hear the phrase unconditional love in reference to near-death experiences and other, in the New Age. Ever since the 60s, we've all been talking about love, love, love. So that's all great, but don't lose the power of it. Those who've had near-death experiences or other spiritually transformative experiences, because this can come as the gift of desperation, this can come through meditation, centering prayer, it can come completely out of the blue. This kind of awareness that changes our lives and shows the absolute concrete reality of that spiritual realm comes in many different ways. But the power of it is that it really changes us fundamentally and really changes everything. I had to go back and question everything I ever thought I knew about brain, mind, consciousness, the nature of space and time, causality. Every bit of it had to be put into reworking to try and get a better understanding of how all of this works.
Talking about unconditional love and experiencing it are two different things. I think getting the concept is kind of like trying to wrap your head around the concept of infinity. You get it in little bits.
Well, I think we all have an idea, say a parent and child can have an idea of what that unconditional love means. When you love something so much that you would give up your own existence for that other being. That's kind of along the lines of what we're talking about here, but the power of it goes so much further than that. And I would point out that the reason that unconditional love is so crucial for each and every one of us to get is it does offer up infinite capacity for healing. We are all in the process of healing just by being incarnate in these forms, so we don't have to have a terminal diagnosis already, but we're in the process of healing, learning, and growing that our souls do in this process of ascendance. And unconditional love, to truly know it and live it and to serve as a conduit for that unconditional love of the Creator for the creation, and to bring that into this world, starting first and foremost with loving ourselves. What I came to see after my coma journey is so much of the travesty of this world is we don't even love ourselves enough. We don't remember that divine, infinite, eternal, spiritual being that we are and its connection, absolute solid connection to that divine, all-powerful God, enough to know how worthy we are of that love and that it gives us the ability to be absolutely fearless. As I said in Proof of Heaven, you have nothing to fear. This was a crucial part of the lessons of my journey. And that's what I try to convey to others, is fear. The old saying, nothing to fear but fear itself. Well, that goes a lot deeper than I ever realized. I came to see that so much of the bad that occurs in our material world and in the lower spiritual realm is due to that fear. And by remembering our connection to the divine and the grand scale of the beings that we truly are, that we're eternal spiritual beings that come here through many incarnations in our process of ascendance towards that oneness with the divine, as we remember that, come to know that, come to live that, do that through daily meditation or whatever your practice is, to come in touch with that on a regular basis. That's what enables us to be fearless, and again, that unconditional love, to love ourselves fully as we truly deserve it as those grand spiritual beings, and to love our neighbors, to love others I came to see that some who I had seen as my enemy, my nemesis before my coma, were actually very near and dear soul mates. We were here to teach each other very difficult lessons in this lifetime. And so it's so important to realize that even those who seem to be opposing you, kind of in your way, look at yourself as being in a partnership with them as your souls are ascending and growing. I mean, I guess it kind of gets back to that old saying, well, pray for your enemy too. Very much that sense. But this is where the unconditional love can have tremendous power, and it gives us power to heal not only ourselves as individuals, and of course I see all of us as physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and divine entities in this rich tapestry of interconnected lives, soul groups, multiple incarnations, as all of this ascends, and part of it is an evolution of the universe being created through consciousness in these higher levels. But that unconditional love has tremendous power to enable healing for the individual, for the soul group, for all of humanity, for all of life on Earth, and of course for all of consciousness throughout the universe, which is far, far grander than I ever realized before. My coma journey showed me clearly that it is that kind of indescribable civilization out there, much of it far advanced beyond humans and life on Earth, and yet we're all in the same process of manifesting that love, that unconditional love of the Creator for the creation, as all of this evolves.
And it seems like finding a way to dissolve our sense of separation, that we're separate from not only other people that we see ourselves with, but other beings like animals, as you were talking about earlier, and even insects, even the trees, even the rocks. Everything.
And that is what is so beautiful, is to come to see that oneness. There's another recent book that I really love. It's by Dr. Larry Vossi. It's called The One Mind. It came out last year. Highly recommended to people. And it's really about the coming understanding, in science, philosophy, theology, of this oneness that is part of consciousness. And all of our consciousness does converge to that oneness. And again, so crucial to point out, this is not limited to humans, because I think that's a great source of confusion for some of the skeptics out there who are not really getting it. This is about all of life, and not only on Earth, as I said, but far beyond the bounds of this world. And it's that oneness that is something that we're trying to come to a deeper understanding of. I think it's crucial at any kind of understanding of this. Again, the reductive materialism of science that I had worshipped before was very misleading, because it said if you reduce everything down to, electrons, protons, quarks, photons, the atoms, molecules, cells of the brain, and everything in the physical world, you can explain everything. In fact, you lose a tremendous amount with that approach. And so it's much more one of coming from the other direction, ascending to the higher and higher realms, to the very core of all creation in deep conscious meditation, that we can come to see this much more clearly, and then realize that it makes more sense to look from the top down and make sense of it that way. Things are much less confusing than when you've broken it all down into little parts and expect that to give you a model and a way of explaining the workings of the world.
And it seems a challenge that we have before us is finding a way to keep our hearts open and dissolve the sense of separation and come into this place of oneness, and also be able to say no to actions that we feel are creating more suffering on the planet.
Right. This is very much about that kind of growth of all of humanity. Is to knowing that oneness. I remember when I came back from my coma journey, I was spending a lot of time thinking about consciousness, mind, brain, consciousness. And then Karen Newell pointed out to me, it's all about that heart energy, about that love. And that's what I came to see, especially as you kind of realize the illusory nature of the material realm. It made a lot more sense for me to put that conscious awareness and that oneness that we all share as kind of a heart energy. It's more of a loving, embracing, and resonance of that love between beings. And I feel that when I give presentations, for example. I can feel that very strongly that heart energy, that resonance, that expansion, and that oneness coming together out of that unconditional love. And the more any of us can do that, we can change this world. And I believe this world is changing in dramatic fashion. A lot of it will have to do with more people meditating, going deep into consciousness, and finding some of these deep truths, and this great comfort in knowing more fully who we truly are. And that involves knowing how we are all together as one. This sense of individuality is an important thing to know of and recognize, but it's that deeper awareness within us, the observer, that is closer to the heart of our consciousness. And that observer can actually have a far grander view of this oneness of all and of the nature of our existence here. And that's what I encourage people to develop, is that sense of oneness and of love and what we all share.
It seems that even as things have been falling apart economically and environmentally, it's forcing, in a way, us to take another look at our attachment to the material realm. You know, how many cars we have, how many houses, things not quite working. Another kind of sense is creating a deeper awareness of the oneness.
Well, I think that is very true. One of the values that we gain through meditation, as we come to see more who we truly are and what this is all about, it also allows us to realize that the material realm is very much set up as this cleverly wrought illusion. It's soul school. There's a reason for it. In fact, I would say all of existence is there to support this realm where sentient beings come in these periodic incarnations to help learn and teach these lessons as part of that higher soul group. And in the greatest sense, it's really a learning and a growth and an evolution of all consciousness throughout the universe. That's kind of how it's unfolding. But so much of this is realizing that we're far grander than birth to death, nothing more, these little physical bodies. And that's something we can all come to know. And that's a big part of this awakening that I think humanity is going through. And it will change this world to realize that a lot of the fears that we have in this material world of not having enough in the material world, of that it ends when we die, that kind of thing, those fears are not don't have a basis in the deeper reality. And that's why it's so important for us to come into touch with that and realize the coin of the realm in our true home, in our spiritual home, is that unconditional love. That's the only thing that's important, the only thing that has any value to us in our grander self, in our multi-lived self that's here with soul groups to learn these deep lessons and then to develop life plans between lives and come in and do it better and do it better as we ascend, is all about that unconditional love. And there's really nothing else that matters. In the material realm, just to remember that the only value of any kind of material accumulation here in the material realm is as we can use it to manifest that love of the Creator for the creation, pass out to take care of the least, the last, the lost. That's where this is all going. And the world can't help but be a better place as more and more people get on board with this.
Mm-hmm. Would you say then that our purpose, our whole purpose is really just to come to this awareness of unconditional love and of our oneness with all of creation?
Well, at this point, I can't say what any ultimate purpose is, but to me, this is very much what I see myself, soul group, humanity, consciousness in this universe is all about ascending with that as the rule. Love, compassion, forgiveness, and that as we do that, we do ascend in that realm. Now, another thing that's important to point out whenever you're talking about kind of causality and where things are going is, as I said when I described my journey very briefly, time flow in that realm and causality in that higher spiritual realm are completely free, not at all encumbered by this illusory time and causality that we see in this realm. That is a very important thing to understand. And I'm still trying to understand it at deep levels. But the important thing is that whole realm is one that has a much higher kind of purpose and causality to it. And it's really by going there, whether it's through meditation or NDEs or what have you, and then looking back down into this realm, that we can see the illusory nature of past, present, future as they're presented to us in this realm. And in fact, materialist science and cosmology, in trying to reconcile relativity and quantum mechanics and that kind of thing, is coming to a new understanding of time in this realm. Einstein was plenty wise to realize that past, present, and future are cleverly wrought illusions. And what he was saying is that as we come to a deeper reconciliation of physics and cosmology as we know them today, especially reflecting the deep mysteries of quantum mechanics, it will necessitate the complete reworking of our ideas of causality and of past, present, future, and the nature of time flow here.
We have a question from Nina. I know there are many wonderful practices to help shift consciousness, but why does it seem at times almost impossible to actually transform all this from just cerebral noise to feeling it experientially?
Well, I think the important thing is really trying to make it more of a regular daily practice for more and more souls involved in this quest. So I said the work that I've been doing with Sacred Acoustics, with Karen Newell and Kevin Cossey, to develop sound meditations that I believe free up our conscious awareness to a much higher level, is the kind of tool that I want to bring to this world to really help people wake up. It's an industrial strength meditative tool. And of course, for me, when I'm talking about these deep sound enhanced meditations, I'm talking about a form of centering prayer that has an infinitely loving, all-powerful deity at the core of it all, and is fully knowing of that unconditional love and the oneness of all. This is not some vacuous form of meditation trying to get to nothingness. It's something that's far richer and fuller than that in terms of this love and changing the world, acknowledging the oneness, and moving this world in a much more positive direction. And I think that is doable. I think, in fact, that this awakening that I believe is occurring now is unprecedented, that it's going to be the most fundamental awakening in recorded human history, and that it is all part of acknowledging the far grander community that we are to become part of, which is consciousness throughout this universe. And that is something I believe we're on the verge of. You had mentioned earlier some of the cataclysms we face, the economic cataclysm and the ecological mayhem that the 20th century allowed us to manifest. In fact, I would say we're at a point where we have free will. As individuals, I believe that free will is why all this exists. But also as soul groups, as humanity, we have a free will. I do not believe it's in our best interest to commit planetary suicide. I know from plenty of consideration of question of suicide around near-death experiences, I have a lot to say, but I do not believe it's really in the cards for us to commit planetary suicide. And in fact, anybody who believes we can keep going with the status quo that we demonstrated in the 20th century and early 21st century, I would say no. This world is headed into very deep trouble if we keep going with that status quo. A lot of it fueled by that kind of scientific materialism and some of the fear that comes out of that very limited kind of thinking. So I would say this is all happening now for a reason. And in fact, a lot of what has become clear to me in looking back over at least 3,000 to 6,000 years of human history has to do with the fact this is part of our destiny, and that includes the 20th century. That heyday of scientific materialism, the successes of science and technology, but also a demonstration of the ugly underbelly of science unbridled from human spirit in the form of modern warfare, thoughtless homicide and suicide, the ecological disaster that we're bringing on ourselves and on all other species. This is all for a reason. It's kind of like cracking the eggshell to make the omelet. And I believe it's part of our destiny. That's part of why this world is awakening now to this much deeper truth.
Like maybe we have to push until we really see it, what we're doing.
Well, I believe that we can come to that. I really do believe, and you might argue that I have kind of a selected audience because I run around and talk to people who come hear me talk because they're interested in this stuff. And yes, there are other people out there who may not be quite as supportive of this whole awakening effort. But I do believe that this world is waking up. And again, I think it's really that we don't have a choice. We need to do the right thing now. And that involves this awakening to a much higher consciousness, which is really a consolidation of wisdom over the ages, also combined with our modern scientific and cosmological understanding of the nature of space-time, mass, energy that's being completely revived because that pure materialism fails. And our new science will be fully acknowledging the kind of non-physical, the consciousness, soul, and spirit, and divine aspects at the basis of all reality.
We have a question from Tura, who's in Bali, actually joining us from Bali. Is there anything you can share with people who are in terrible, debilitating chronic pain?
I think the one thing that I've come to realize, as a neurosurgeon, as a doctor, as a healer, I came to realize after my coma journey that so many of the hurdles and hardships in life, and that especially would include diseases and injuries, chronic pain, things like that, are really part of the lessons that we're here to learn. And although they may seem like very daunting problems, or I remember before my coma, I would have thought, what bad luck, how come, why is this happening to me? But I came to realize after my coma that all of that made much more sense when I could see that I was here to learn lessons and sometimes to teach my soulmates lessons based on those hardships and difficulties, illness, disease, chronic pain, things like that. I do believe that we can come to a deeper awareness and knowing of all of that, the purpose that we have those conditions, and is there a way out of them in this physical incarnation. Come to see the power of prayer and of deep meditation. We have tremendous capacity to heal ourselves, and a lot of it has to do with realizing that we are truly eternal spiritual beings, absolutely divine at the very core of our consciousness, and we can all come to know that. And that does lead to much greater insights into the capabilities of healing ourselves, others, soul group, healing all humanity, healing this whole world and consciousness beyond, as I said, comes from fully coming to know and live that unconditional love of the Creator. So I would say for those who have that kind of difficulty with illness, hardship, chronic pain, etc., that I believe that often we can go deep within and start to find lessons that may be behind that, lessons that maybe we're there to teach others as well as learn ourselves, and often finding some way out of it and finding the power of our own consciousness to control our reality.
Wonderful, thank you. There's so many wonderful comments coming through the chat box. People just loving what you're saying and appreciating. Another question that came through earlier actually was on the soul families. You've been talking quite a bit about soul families. How do you see these? I mean, do we make agreements together? Do soul families have unique purposes, or how would you talk about that?
I would say it's very important to kind of get the concept. To me, it made much more sense in trying to understand all this after my coma to realize that the evolution is more of a soul group than of an individual soul. Again, the more we can kind of step back and rise above and look down from higher and higher levels, the more we can gain clarity on this. And a lot of that, again, has to do with deep meditation, because so much of this cannot even really be gained through analytical and logical processes of the linguistic brain. But we can come to much higher knowing from that kind of thing. And it was clear to me that what seemed to be evolving was much more the soul group. That's why it's important to see that we're often here to teach and learn lessons within our soul groups, that in fact we can often switch roles in different incarnations. For example, maybe parent and child in one incarnation and flip the other way around in other incarnations. I came to realize also that often, in fact, I can say in just about every instance I recall of the hundreds of stories I've heard from families who have lost children, what actually emerged from their telling of those stories and that tragic and horrific loss was that the child was almost always a very advanced soul there to teach a very deep lesson about the love of that Creator for each and every one of us, and the fact that our relationships are the most important thing going, and they do not end with the death of the physical body. And I think that it's just kind of crucial to step back and get a much higher view of it. It seems very confusing, especially if you're still stuck down in murk of thinking, birth to death, nothing more, brain creates consciousness. We really need to rise well above those levels, and that includes seeing that rich tapestry, that fabric of existence of the multiple intertwined threads of individual souls, but interwoven in this incredibly rich growing and learning that we are all doing together, life after life after life. And I would say in the broader sense, it really is that this is about all of humanity, life on Earth and beyond. Again, it kind of gets back to kind of my understanding of Teilhard de Chardin and the whole notion of consciousness creating evolution of the entire universe. I would say that's part of this process. But we're kind of like a hologram. We are all that in the microcosm. But it makes more sense when you can step back and realize kind of the bigger picture of how all that works. But the soul group is crucial. And yes, I believe we do interact with our soulmates between lives, plan the incarnations, one of the hardships and difficulties we'll be facing, and then we dive back in and do it again. Crucial point, again to stress, time flow and causality in that realm are completely free. They're not locked into time flow in this realm. So people who hear all this kind of discussion say, uh-oh, what if my beloved who passed over 15 years ago has already reincarnated and isn't there when I pass over? No. By definition, our soulmates are where they need to be at the right time for all of this. And it's none of it is slave to time flow and events in this lowest material realm.
That is a beautiful point. Thank you. Well, there was one more question that came through. If you feel that reincarnation is imperative or a choice?
My feeling on that from my journey is that we do come back here. I would say our souls are chomping at the bit to come back into these bodies, knowing full well that they'll be temporarily dumbed down to a certain level, not having that being privy to all that they know between lives. And important to stress, they do not have infinite knowledge between lives. That does not happen. That's how this is all an evolution and a growing process of ascendance and of learning. This is soul school. And so I believe that our souls do very much plan those incarnations, and that is part of how all this evolves and how we're here to learn those particular lessons.
Wonderful. Would you want to talk to us a little bit before you go about Consciousness Initiative?
Yes, I would. If people go to EBENALEXANDER.com, they can learn a lot more about all of what I'm doing and efforts here. I would also recommend people go to Eternia, ETERNEA.org to learn a lot more about it. And you can, on EBENALEXANDER.com, learn more about the Consciousness Initiative. It is basically a nonprofit initiative that I started with the Marian Institute in New Bedford, Massachusetts, with Michael and Margie Baldwin. And it is really about supporting the research. There's a lot of scientific research that needs to be done to help in these efforts to develop the tools, say, of sacred acoustics. We have some projects now with the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia that we're working on, and I want to try and generate some of the funding to help in this research that has to do with these meditative techniques, with the physics of consciousness, with coming to show how spirituality and science actually strengthen each other and are coming together. And the Consciousness Initiative is really a way for people to support that research effort and to help promote this kind of growth. And that's why I would encourage people. It's what's called the Consciousness Initiative is a serendipity project of the Marian Institute. And people can learn more at EBENALEXANDER.com about all that. But it really is to support this kind of public education and awareness, as well as the fundamental research to develop the tools to help all of us get into these deep transcendental meditative states and come to know so much more of the reality of our spiritual selves.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and taking this time. And I know you're going to be in Portland in June at the Afterlife Conference also.
Right.
So for anybody who would like to be able to see you live, That would be wonderful.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing you again soon.